right. Hi, everyone. I know it feels kind of weird for me to be on the microphone, but we wanted to record it for people who couldn't make it. So most of you, actually everybody, I know everybody, but hopefully you can meet a new person if you haven't already. Also, we just want to hear what came to mind when we asked that question, where you've seen North City, our church, at its best. And we're just going to open it up for a few minutes, and would love to hear what came to mind. Connie's memorial service. That was a really, really meaningful time to celebrate her. Yeah, and to come together that way. Other things that come to mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so at the park and just being really open, people finding us, even though it was in the middle of a pandemic. Oh, it turns out we're still in that phase, okay. Other things that come to mind. The trunk or treat. It was, we were told like 50 neighbors would come and like 300 people came for the trunk or treat. Oh, you think so? You think more than 300? 500, okay. Wow. And you gave away one piece of candy per person? Yeah. Okay. Like, wow. I think everybody had Joseph to thank and Bree for just like feeding way more people than we thought. And our grill, the grill that we had, was not functioning well. So, yeah, I know. They're just like, what are you going to do now? Give me a hot dog. I came here. I was promised food. Cool. Any other things that come to mind? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, when there's a balance of small groups getting together and bigger group are gathering together, yeah. Cool. I'll just pause and we'll just pray together, and then we'll jump on into more of what we're talking about. God, we thank you that you've brought each and every person here. God, that you are good, and we gather as a church because of you, Lord Jesus, because of the hope that we have in your resurrection, God, because of not just the salvation of our souls, but the nourishment that we get to experience around the table with you and with one another. And God, I just pray as we jump into what it would look like to say, North City is not only my church home, but I'm a potential mission partner. We want that to be something that you are leading, not just that JD and I are leading, but God, you have imagination and dreams for this church, and we want to hear it. So we pause to invite your presence around this table. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I just think it's worth naming, as my iPad times out here, I think it's really worth naming to say church meetings and member meetings, or like whatever type of experience of church meetings you've had in the past, can bring all sorts of church baggage. And I know a lot of your stories. And so I just want to name that, like, you have no idea what you're coming into this meeting, and maybe you're feeling like, what type of things are they going to try to pull me into? And I think that, like, the future therapist in me is like, let's just name that can feel like an anxious thing. Like, it might feel anxious to talk about finances. It might feel anxious to talk about commitment, especially after the last couple years where we've been reevaluating what it means to be a part of a church. When all of that's taken away, and then we're saying, okay, what does it look like to be North City Church? It can kind of feel a little nerve-wracking. And so I think it's worth naming that, and we want to be as transparent about who we feel like God is calling us to be and have a conversation about that. And so we want to give time and space at the end for questions. There's way more information in this like little packet that we're going to give you than what we're going to cover. And hopefully that will feel like, okay, good, this will answer some of more of my questions. But we are excited because this feels like a bigger moment for North City because since last year, we've grown in double. Like there were 49 people, including little people. We're not discounting the children, like including all the kids last year at this time, and now there's about 100 people participating regularly. That's kind of wild. Like we fill this room in a different way than we did even when we first started gathering outside in the park. And so what we hope that this meeting, really focuses in on is, okay, what does that big moment mean? How did we get to here? Where are we going from here? And how do we continue in the mission that God has called us to? And I'm going to bring this over here because I feel like I can see all your faces better. And so just that's a snapshot, is that we want to look back and say, okay, why does North City exist? And where are we going? Maybe some of you are newer to our mission. And so you are saying, okay, what does that look like longer term? Well, we're going to try to share a little bit more about what that could look like longer term. Where are we now, like a snapshot, and how do we get there? So JD is just going to share a little bit more about the why does North City exist piece.
Thank you. This microphone seems weird, but I'll keep rolling with it. I'd rather be around a big circle and table with you all. But can you imagine this scenario with me for a second? What if you and your best friend or maybe your partner or spouse turned to you and asked, why are we in a relationship? You'd kind of be annoyed, right? You'd kind of be like, excuse me? And you asked a little bit further, and they said, well, because they might not have immediate answers. It might not be completely clear to them. But what if you spent the next 5 minutes sort of digging with some follow-up questions to really get at what difference you made in their lives and what difference, how their life is different because they're in relationship with you? This is a question that a guy named Simon Sinek asks, and if you know anything about Simon Sinek, his main is discover your why. Discover your unique contribution in the world. And you can apply that individually, and we believe that God created us all uniquely in his image to be a part of his mission. But we've been asking those questions of North City. We certainly have plenty to do. Growth has really been fun to manage, and the uniqueness of trying a new thing called Dinner Church. But the leadership team and the staff has been pausing the last few months to ask, what is our why? What is forming in all of this beautiful chaos? And what is our unique contribution in this season in the world? And let's start with that and build everything else around it. Instead of starting with all of the church shoulds, starting with all of the things that a church should be, let's look at our unique contribution in the world. So through that, I just want to kind of bring you a synthesis of what some of that is. Of course, I left my phone out here. Here are how some people responded to that. And there's no one amazing answer to this. These are all awesome answers. They said, North City exists so that there's one less isolated neighbor, so that neighbors become present to God's presence in everyday life, so that neighbors are welcomed into Jesus' family at Jesus' table, to create a safe space to encounter Jesus at the table, so that our community is known, nourished, and loved, so that neighbors are invited to the table, connected with Jesus, and find their village. What I functionally have ultimately landed on is kind of an addition to our mission statement, loving our neighbors in the way of Jesus by creating space for neighbors to become friends and get invited into the family of God. And that might sound like, good job, we can put that on a letterhead, but I think there's some really unique things in that. I think the way that we do church, the way that we gather around a table, has uniquely situated us to create a a unique kind of space that's so desperately needed in our neighborhood, in our lives, and in our world. And the best way I can describe the space that North City is uniquely gifted to create is the logo, the trendy logo that we accidentally created when we launched the church. Phil, I think some others in this room were a part of that logo creation process, and we had some vagaries about who we are today. We're like, I think this is a church that's going to be focused on the table. So we had a couple different logo options. Some of them had houses, neighborhood themes, and then we landed on this somewhat trendy logo. I don't know if it's trendy anymore. It was made 3 years ago. It's probably not trendy anymore. It was at the time. And it didn't mean much to us other than its trendiness, and it kind of looked like a table. But now I get such deep meaning about our unique contribution to the world from it. In my eyes, if it's in front of you somewhere, I don't know that it actually is, you can see it, but it's got 4 arrows or chairs around a table, and then our cool N in the middle. And what that's come to represent for me is the space that we're all gifted to create, a space where God's presence, maybe he can be the gold one around the table. Our presence, our authentic presence, who we are, the presence of a stranger in our midst, and the presence of the beloved community. And I think what happens here every Sunday is a convergence, a nexus of those 4 presences, and I think that's making a difference in people's lives. Because I hear it all the time. I hear stories like, I haven't come to church in 20 years and I felt so different being in this space. Or I haven't come to church in 2 years and I was really scared to come back to church because of that. And I think something unique happens in the context, in the spaces that we create. And I can tell it's making a difference, not because people who participate here, the number of people who participate here has doubled. I hear the stories and the difference that it's making in our everyday lives. So, this meeting is really about how do we start from that place and how do we move forward to create more of those spaces. So if anyone these days asks me, hey, what's next for North City? Usually they're like, give me the 3-point bullet vision for your 10-year vision and all the metrics and stuff. And my simple answer to those folks is just more tables, more of these spaces. And that means creating it right here, creating the capacity to do it in this space or whatever space we end up in the fall. It means doing it out there in the summer, but it might also mean more spaces like what we're creating here. So today is about inviting you into that, naming some of the transparent obstacles we face in order to do what we're doing now and do what God's calling us to do next, and also an exciting opportunity to come into a space like this. Guys, there's no other church like this around here in this space that I know of. And when I go around and talk with other people, they lean in, and they're so fascinated with what God is doing here. And I think it's a big part of how the church is transforming to reach its communities around them. So enough vision-y stuff from JD. I'm going to pass it off to Christian Ann.
Yeah, I think we just want to name that the people around the table are changing and growing, and we want to create more space for them. So I'm going to try to do that as kind of clearly as what the like, how do we get there? How do we keep moving? How do we keep growing? Not in the sense of like we have this 5-year trajectory, but how do we make sure that there's space for people to come and experience Jesus around the table? So that last one for me of like what our why is, it's that people would feel welcome to the table, that they would be able to meet Jesus, and they'd be able to find their village. Because I don't know about you, but when I have my people around me, I feel a lot more compelled to be able to say yes to God. Because doing that as a lonely one-person job feels lonely. So for us, the growth piece, like, we've been able to name these things as like good challenges. When I say challenge, like that could feel heavy, but we see it as a really good thing, like these challenges that we're facing. So that physically there's just twice as many people. And if all of them came, like there literally wouldn't be enough room for everybody. So that's just a real reality. And what's really cool is that has happened even during a pandemic when people have been nervous to gather in spaces like this. We sort of anticipate that we will continue to grow in that type of way, that this is something that God's doing, and so I think people are going to join in. And so our question has been asking, how do we steward that growth? Now, what's really cool is that 38% of those 100 people 38 people, are people under 18. So that's a huge percentage of our church. And we want to make sure that as we grow, we're being mindful of not just doing programming for younger kids, but including them in our mission, and making sure that there are spaces for them to grow. I just love, like, Rosie, who, as you've seen, come in and out, like, she just feels like she owns the place, and which I love. And this, more recently, to tell you just a little story, there's this new family that's come, and she has been so welcoming to their oldest daughter, and just said, hey, you can come sit next to me. So it's not that, like, these little people are like extras or burdens in our mission. Like, they are living out the mission, and I've seen that happen, like that sense of welcome. Another challenge is that we're in the midst of needing more funding, and funding is like the worst way that you could say that. But, like, to live out this mission, like, it takes $260 on average to host a meal here, about $260 to have it in this space. And at this point, we're about halfway through of what it actually takes on a monthly basis to run this church. And so where we've been at from a generosity standpoint, so maybe you've heard us talk about the generosity team, we are at the end of a season of denominational support. So we're part of the Evangelical Covenant denomination, and that has been with us for the last 3 years. JD and I also have sort of reached out to our personal network and fundraised that way. And so even though we're about half of where we're at on local giving, we've filled in the gaps over the last 3 years with that type of funding. And now that's done. And so just in, like, really brass tacks types of ways, we want to inform you and make sure that you guys feel like you can ask questions about our funding. And the generosity team has said, okay, how can we be wise stewards, where we were at a budget around $160,000 per year, and we want to trim it down to $120,000, because by November of this year, like, literally we'll run out of money. And we've been really conscious to say, let's build up a savings of 3 months of what our funding is. And so we're just at the place where we need to grow in that way as well. We need to grow and increase our giving. And so we're going to talk a little bit about kind of a really simple way to think about it. And so our local giving, even though we have about 16 units, that could be a person, an individual, that could be a family, we want to grow that. And that has, on average, about any of those numbers have been about $260 a month. So that's why I kind of named, like, actually, that's what it costs to do a meal. That's what it costs to be in this space. And so, but this only covers, where we're at currently, only covers about 52% of our budget. So that's just where we're at, and we want to share kind of how to keep going. Because for us, we've even taken some pay cuts in terms of our time and wanting to be wise stewards of that as well. But to keep growing and making space for people, we need to grow that way financially as well. So how do we get there? That's kind of like the next piece is, we hope that we've been using the term launch team when we started, and we are now, nobody's on the launch team anymore. Like, we've fully launched. Like, we're here and we're in year 3, and we hope to grow a sense of mission partnership, where each person can feel like, I'm a partner in this mission. This isn't JD and Christian Ann's church. This is our church. And to do that, it's saying, we're going to give of our heart, we're going to give of our time, and we're going to give of our finances to keep this amazing church going. And so in terms of financial partnership, we hope that we can get to 100% participation. And I'll just name what I mean by that. Like, every person who considers North City their church home and themselves a mission partner, that they would be giving in some way that feels fitting for your finances, and that you are participating and saying, I'm going to give because this is my church. And we've been able to calculate to kind of keep going at the mission level we want to, and to keep this church going, we need to grow our monthly giving by about $3,000. So where we're at needs to grow on a monthly basis to about $3,000. And so we're going to pass out those things. Great. our generosity team said, okay, how could we make this a little bit more feasible for people? So we broke it down to a person. We broke it down to a table of who's participating at dinner church and what it would cost to do that, to welcome that space. So your invitation is, one, just to ask, God, what if this is my church, like how could I open up and say, I'm in financially, I'm in this way, and consistently. Part of this is us being able to know what funds we can count on to be able to say, this is what we can say yes to in the community. It's not just making sure we meet our budget and ending in the black, but what ways we could grow, what ways we can change. So your invitation is, in terms of finances, like set the table for somebody else. That's $45 a month. I thought this was so cool how Katie Fogg is the one that kind of authored this. Set the table for a family of 4 every month. That's $175 a month. Set a whole table for $450, or just start giving at whatever level makes sense for you right now. What's really cool is that we've reached out to people who've been a part of our mission in the past, whether they were a launch team person or moved away, and we have about $3,000 in matching grants for first-time givers. So I think that's really cool that there's people who said, hey, I can't be a part of this directly, so I want to make sure to match that because I love what God's doing through North City. So I think what helps us the most is consistency, and to say, hey, this is going to come out of either an electronic withdrawal or online. We have those systems available, and to be able to say, yeah, you can count on me because this is my church. This is the people that I want to be a part of. I want to keep seeing what God's going to do around this table. So really simply, we're looking for 15 more people, couples or families, that would be saying, I want to start a monthly gift. When we talked about this as the generosity team, on one hand, we could say, oh my gosh, we could literally shut our doors by November. That could be the freak out way of viewing it. And we just really don't think that that's going to happen. Because we've shifted in this way of doing church, we haven't had giving be a part of people's radar. And I just know, there are so many other things in my adulting life that I'm keeping track of. Some of you might be like, yeah, I gave that one time, or it just falls off the radar. And so we just ask that you would revisit that conversation with God, if you're in a marriage relationship with your partner, and to say, hey, what is it that God might be asking us to do? What do we want to commit to for North City? So the second thing, I'm just going to let that hang there for a second, and then we are going to answer questions at the end, is that this is not just about keeping the doors open from a financial level. We have 38 to 40% kids. We have a host team that is here early, setting up, taking stuff out of the trailer, and we need to grow that team by about 50% too. So what we would hope is that the ownership level is there with your time as well. And so it's been so cool to say, who is it that is calling North City home consistently and coming? And so that's team partnership. And the way that we're going to invite you to consider, well, one, y'all have been, there's many of you in this room that have been doing that so faithfully. And I just want to pause and say thank you. And I bet you might be a little tired and would love maybe for more people to join that team. And there's so much space for that. There's so much space for people to say, hey, on my serving Sunday, I'm just going to be all in, and I'm going to serve on the host team and in family life. That's totally an option. And then all the other weeks, you just come and join in at the table. And you can split that if you're a couple, but that is totally an option to say, I'm just going to be all in, and that's kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So just to put that on your radar, and so same goal here. We would love for 100% participation of our whole church that says, I'm a part of North City, I'm a mission partner, to be serving in some capacity. And then that will just lighten the load for other people that are part of our North City. So if you guys have questions about kind of what specifically it looks like to serve on each one of those teams, we would love to help answer those questions as well. So do we want to pause for questions now or just keep going? Yeah, let's do that.
Sweet. Kristen Ann and I always joke that when we have like family meetings, we get towards the end of it and we feel kind of like emotionally like, ooh, that was heavy stuff. But we're doing great. So why does our face look different than how we're actually doing? So if you're feeling that right now, I just want to speak some confidence into you. I'm very confident of this church's mission. I think there's some big hurdles ahead, but I'm very confident that God will provide for what he's asked us to do, because he has ever since we started and before that even happened. So one thing I want to just highlight is you see there's 3 columns there. It was very important to us because you can maybe misinterpret the narrative that all this church wants from me is my time and my money. Those are very important things to being invested in the mission of this thing. But I want you to understand that we see church so much differently than that. Our mandate as pastors and leaders is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. That's what the Bible says. Equip you all to fulfill the mission of the church, which is why there's that 3rd section there to create space. So to be a mission partner, probably the most crucial part of being a mission partner is to see yourself on mission with us. And what we're doing is creating space for you to do that every week around tables. So if you need me to come commission you as table pastor, I will come lay my hands on you and pray over you. I'm being kind of tongue-in-cheek about that, but I really believe that. We're creating space for you all who are following the way of Jesus, who are on this mission with us, to be that person who authentically brings themselves and pays attention to God's presence, to listen well to the stranger, to interact with the beloved community every time that you're gathered. And in addition to that, I think I get asked the question, well, we're growing, what are we going to do? And the short answer is create space for everyone. And that means that this building might not be our home in the future if we get too big for it. But what it also could mean is that God might give you dreams for how to create that same sort of thing that happens here in other spaces with either other people who aren't a part of North City yet or people who are a part of North City. And I want to have that conversation with you. So that's why I outlined that in the creating space, as that's a key and probably the most foundational part of being a mission partner, is to see the tables that you come around as a space where you're participating in God's mission to love your neighbors in the way of Jesus. Make sense? Cool. Let's open it up. Q and R. Q and response. Maybe Q&A? Q and R. All right, who's got a question? Cody.
What were numbers before COVID, essentially? So you started in 2019.
Yeah.
And then you went to the school at Lawrence.
Right.
So what were numbers then?
We launched with probably 40 people September 2019. That grew to maybe 70 at most people, I would say, at pandemic. And then it's hard to say. Everything got blurry from there because participation got weird and changed a bunch. When we did our first dinner church outdoors, there was 25 people there. And that's where I get that 49 number. As best I could count, the people who hung with us through the pandemic and started the experiment of dinner church was about 49 regular participants. And I don't know if you saw, I think I wrote that down, but just in the summertime, in addition to those 49 people, I think 150 people ate with us that just last summer. So, great question. Any other thoughts or questions?
So when we move back outside, we're going to get like a lot more people, probably. And,
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. And then how does discipleship happen for those people who come who maybe want to go deeper in their faith?
Yeah.
We're so like limited with our resources.
That's a great question. You want to tackle that?
I'm going to tackle it. Give me the mic. I think one of the things that JD was being tongue-in-cheek about the table pastors, but it really does matter who they're interacting with around the table. And so there will be moments when we've actually thought about this, and we did this a little bit via a podcast, where we're trying to equip you all to be people of and have discipleship conversations without them being overbearing. And what I've learned is that the people who want to step into more of those spaces will keep coming back. and then we invite them. So I would say, like, one of the things right now that I'm mindful of and that I've talked with a few of the women of is saying, okay, this is our mode of discipleship is meant to be duplicated. So this isn't me just hosting the women's group and finding a bigger space. This is me equipping you all to say, how can we grow and have multiple groups? So we want to create more space for those groups, and I see that as directly coming from me or JD discipling and having more and more spaces. So one, I think equipping us to be better dinner church pastors, to show up and to say, hey, it's okay if one day you're just like, I just need to meet Jesus and I can't, I have my grumpy face on. Like, that's just really real, okay? That's real. And there's other times when you might be able to say, I'm here to really listen and to point things out that I see God doing in your story. That's appropriate, obviously, especially if you sense that type of openness. And we want to equip you to notice some more of those moments.
Daniel was asking me some really crucial questions about his creation back there. But in case this wasn't mentioned, we have a partnership with Mill City Church, and we're about to launch, or at some point we'll launch, a whole online library of equipping hour classes, they call it. We might collaborate with that as well. So there'd be asynchronous resources. Did she mention our experimentation with the 4 o'clock hour? One of the ideas we have is experimenting with this time right here, before what you're at right now, with offering some equipping spaces that may be catered towards, like, who is Jesus 101, towards just studying maybe more depth in Scripture too. Any more questions? Yeah.
How does the budget get affected by an influx of people this summer?
Yeah, I'll tell you, August 31st. No, it is more food, but we try to do less expensive, higher quantity food that's kind of simpler. So we bought a sweet new grill, and we just have planned for that in our overall food budget. And an influx in a food budget is an incremental change, but we've planned for it overall, and it's not huge overall of the budget. But great question. We do. I'm trying to get it to about the same. So the plan for this summer is that the kids will actually be in this space because it's a little more safe and secure every Sunday. And then when we have inclement weather, we'll just take the whole building back over. And they're giving us that option to slide into that. Otherwise, we'll be the adults and the beginning of the meal will be somewhere outside, easy enough to transition the kids safely in here so we can have a secure area for their programming. Any other questions? Any more thoughts, ideas? It doesn't have to be a question. Celebrations.
So you mentioned that you're trying to get the budget down from 160 to 120. How is that happening?
It's already underway. It's already underway with some cuts that we made preliminarily. And then part of that is an assessment of how we spend money now and how we have spent money in the last year. And there'll be some cuts that may just be efficiency, or frankly, for a season might be uncomfortable. There might be things that we know want to be a part, that we need to have a part of the life of our church in the long term. But for this short phase of trying to get self-sustainable and build a foundation for growth, we might need to withhold some things as well. And some of that comes through a creative increase of, or creative reduction of expenses or increase in income. So we have ideas about inviting outside support to like fund a meal or something like that. I've applied for grants and stuff like that. So there's creative outside income, but then creative reduction of expenses around food maybe as well. So through partnership, essentially.
And there's kind of a breakdown of how, what was it, every $100 or every dollar is? 100? Okay. Yeah. Percentages. Yeah, of how we currently spend money in that vein. So I think it's just, I know I really appreciate transparency. And we want that to be an open conversation of like, oh, notice that this area is going down. What about neighborhood investment? And hope is that continues to be a conversation.
Yeah, Cody.
So the dinner church vision, is that pretty solid still? Maybe it says in the pamphlet I got there. Is that pretty solid still to November, or is that just a summer thing, or do you want to continue that indefinitely?
The way we're doing church now on Sundays is what we see ourselves doing indefinitely. And the only shift during the summer is that we do it outside and we make it slightly more approachable for last summer we posted up right in front of the pool, if you remember that. So like a family or someone coming right outside the pool who just wants to eat with us, there's some unchurchifying of what we do right now to make it a little bit more accessible. And it's naturally, maybe you could use the language outreach focused in the summer, and then we build in some more discipleship formation components, which is what you experience now on a weekly basis for our Sunday gatherings. But that way of doing things for the main thing we do is what we see God asking us to do for the foreseeable future. The only exception is if some of you all come to me and have a creative idea how to create more spaces like what we're doing that might have an iteration, but the same elements of creating that space of Jesus' presence, our presence, the neighborhood, and the beloved community. We'd be open to that. So it might take a different iteration, and that would be really cool. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I might just close this out and let you know of ways that you can kind of keep talking with us. And there is that first little half sheet could be used as like a turn it in contact card if you want. I feel like in an age of no paper, it's like, oh, we actually need a pen for something. We would love to hear what you're thinking in terms of, do you consider North City your church and that you want to keep, being a mission partner with us? And what are the ways that you want to say yes to that? I think I want you guys all to know that it's okay if it's a no. If it's a, I'm not sure, let's keep talking. And we're just kind of trying to see where people are at this month. So we're going to have another one of these meetings on May 22nd. And then, hi there, come on in, guys. June 5th is kind of that Sunday is kind of when we're trying to be able to plan financially to hear where people are at and what type of gifts there might be that are increases or that are starting gifts so that we can plan accordingly for the rest of this year and adjust our budget as needed. So, and we're just actively hoping to grow these teams too. So it just would really help us in terms of the staff planning, and we can communicate to Bree when she comes back from Europe, like, hey, look at all these new people that we have for your teams. I'm sure she'd love that. But most of all, I don't know, when JD and I set out to do this, this is not just about us being pastors and having our dream church. This is about the people and the village that God is creating and connecting. And I know I get way more excited about people saying yes with us. It's not about you guys empowering us. We hope that we can be equipping people because you have everything you need. God has given you everything you need in your gifts, in your passions, to create more spaces around these tables and in your neighborhoods. We get excited about the ways that God's growing those dreams. And this has been about the last 3 years, and we don't want it to be done. There were some really tired moments, and it was y'all that kept us going, where we could then see what God was doing again. So I just want to say thank you for journeying. For those of you who are just like, oh yeah, new to this mission, and to say, hey, thanks for being here. And so I'll just close us, and then feel free to grab any of us afterwards. Oh, sure. Can we put you on their spot? Okay. Thanks, Renee.